Whipping, dismemberment with axes, sexual abuse, attacks by trained dogs and amputations were some of the punishments and tortures carried out by the most macabre and infamous women of Nazism, who caused a justified and uncontrollable fear in the Jewish prisoners just by looking at them. During the Third Reich, there were around 5,000 female guardians, or Aufseherinnen as they were called. These represented 10% of the total number of guards in the Nazi camps, much more than is sometimes believed. Although there is more talk about the crimes against humanity carried out by the male members of the SS, the actions of the Nazi women in the concentration camps were the same, or even more cruel and inhuman. Some have really gone down in history for showing a barbarism and malice that not only frightened their prisoners, but also the Nazis themselves. Today we will review the history of 4 of the most terrible women in the Third Reich, whose nicknames already imply the terror they instigated and the inhumanity of their acts. These were the Hyena of Auschwitz, the Beast, Bloody Bridget and the Witch of Buchenwald. Despite her blonde curls and her youth, the cold and severe eyes reveal the true monstrous nature of Irma Grese, who was born into a humble family in 1923 and had to work as a child to care for her orphan siblings. After several trips to the labor office, the young woman finally got a permanent job in 1942 as an assistant to the female SS Corps at the Ravensbrück concentration camp, a barbaric training center for SS guards. There, Irma Grese found her true passion, torture. After being sent to Auschwitz, she met Joseph Mengele, her new teacher, and unleashed her perversion. Grese beat and flogged female prisoners for pleasure, many times before sexually abusing them. She soon earned nicknames that made her proud, such as the Beautiful Beast, the Angel of Death and Cerberus. Her cruelty caught the attention of the Nazi generals who, far from punishing her, promoted her to head of Sector C of the camp, which housed 30,000 prisoners. Grese continued her terrible practices, focusing especially on the sick and disabled. Gradually her tortures became more dantesque. She launched hungry dogs on children, she had the breasts of some prisoners amputated and, according to many testimonies, she used the skin of the deceased to make table lamps. Finally, in 1945, she was captured and tried. The evidence and testimonies were overwhelming and, at the end of that same year, she met her fate on the gallows. Not very different was the end of Maria Mandel. Born in Austria in 1912, she was expelled from high school and even from her home because of her violent behavior. Mandel began working as a guard in Nazi camps in 1938, first at Ravensbrück, where she participated in inhumane experiments using prisoners as guinea pigs, but, a few years later, she arrived at her true home, Auschwitz. She was appointed camp chief and began a reign of terror that earned her the nickname, the Beast of Auschwitz. She was in charge of building the barracks of the second section of the camp, and designed them in such a way that they would be unbearably uncomfortable for the prisoners. Mandel stood out because her torture methods were more psychological than physical. For example, she used to stand in front of the prisoners for hours waiting for one of them to look at her. When one of these made the mistake of doing so, she was immediately sent to the gas chambers. At the same time, she used to force the camp music band to play old military marches while torturing the Jewish women. It is estimated that Maria Mandel was responsible for the death of approximately 500,000 women, including political prisoners, Poles, Gypsies, and Jews. In 1945, she was captured by the Allies and, 3 years later, she was executed by hanging like Irma Grese. Another of the Aufseherinnen who went down in history for her cruelty was Hildegard Lächert, better known as Bloody Bridget. When the Nazis began their extermination process, she voluntarily enlisted in the Majdanek concentration camp. There, she quickly displayed her cruelty, for which she was nicknamed the Tigress and transferred to Auschwitz. Lächert was, in the words of her own SS colleagues, a brutal sadist. She used to flog the Jewish prisoners until she turned the room into a veritable butcher shop and, according to some testimonies, she even used to beat her victims until she herself was covered in blood. Lächert had no mercy, she tortured pregnant women and children with special pleasure. She is said to have gassed groups of more than 100 miners in Majdanek, after gaining their trust with candy. She also used hungry dogs to torture and kill inmates. In December 1944, she escaped from Auschwitz upon learning that the Red Army was drawing near. However, she was captured and tried in 1947. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but she only served 9. In 1975 her case was reopened and she was given 12 more years, but this sentence was never effective. Although Lächert was said to have worked as a spy for the CIA and the German Federal Intelligence Service to collect information from the Soviet Union, this has never been proven. In 1995, Hildegard Lächert died at the age of 75, barely paying for her crimes against humanity. And now, before continuing, we want to introduce you to our new channel, Military Aviation. Here we'll explore the extraordinary world of combat aircraft and the latest developments of the world's most important air forces, as well as the most incredible air missions of today. You'll find the link to subscribe in the description of the video and in the first comment. Despite the misdeeds and atrocities committed by the 3 Nazi women mentioned, there is another one who was perhaps the most macabre woman in the entire Third Reich, the Witch of Buchenwald, Ilse Koch. Born in 1906 and affiliated with the Nazi Party in 1932, Ilse Kohler married Carlotto Koch, the camp manager at Sachsenhausen, on the express recommendation of Heinrich Himmler and moved with him to Buchenwald a few years before the start of the war. The couple shared cruelty and reigned in that concentration camp with unprecedented evil. Karl and Ilse lived in a mansion on the outskirts of the country, with endless luxuries that included a zoo of exotic animals. What Ilse enjoyed most, however, was torture. She had some sort of blackjack with razor blades stuck to the end of it. Among her favorite punishments was locking dozens of prisoners in a barnyard and letting wild dogs loose. Apparently, Koch was a nymphomaniac and used to organize orgies in her big mansion. At the same time, she sexually abused prisoners and forced them to have sex in front of her. She even groped and flashed her breasts to the male prisoners, and whoever was not excited was immediately shot. However, the most macabre thing about the Witch of Buchenwald is that, according to the story, she used to select prisoners with tattoos that she liked to be carefully killed, so that the tattooed pieces of skin could be collected. Although she was never tried for this, several tattooed human skin plants were found in the field. The end of the Koch was not due to the fall of the Third Reich. They were imprisoned and tried by order of Himmler himself, enraged by the luxuries that the marriage gave itself while Germany crumbled. Karl Koch was executed in early April 1945, while Ilse Koch was not convicted at the time, but by the Allies in the Dachau trials years later. Although she could not be sentenced to death because she was pregnant, she did receive a life sentence. Finally, decades later, at age 60, Ilse Koch hanged himself in her cell. While these women received at least some semblance of punishment for their monstrous crimes, this was generally not the case for the female guardians. As of the total of 5,000, only 77 were prosecuted and even fewer were sentenced for their involvement in one of the darkest chapters in human history. We have reached the end of the video and we want to ask you, what other Nazi women with these levels of cruelty do you know? Leave your answer in the comment box below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history. Thank you very much for joining us until the end. And stay tuned for our next video.